Welcome to another Mish-Mashing Battle Lounge with 2MK team.
Let's do this.
We have finished our bots for Street Fighter V and we are moving on to leveling up. So you'll probably be seeing more and more focused play from people going forward. But this week, it means we have to figure out where to restart. And that means the stream is likely to be quieter, since most people will be either referencing their notes or adding to them depending on which characters they have to fight. Today's lounge is 3 rounds first to 2 with character select off. As always, you are looking for a Rune Siren. Remember that this is primarily a East Coast, US, Northern Europe, that whole circle lounge. And we have limited the connection today because this thing seemed to be a little bit unstable recently on the server, so we're worried about all sorts of things really.
Round 1. Fight. Round 2. Fight. You lose. Round 1. Fight. Round 2. Fight. KO. Let's do this. Round one. Fight! Round two. Fight! Final round. Fight! Necali wins. Round one. Fight! Round 2. Fight! Necalli wins.
By our own classification, we generally consider Cosmic Wolf to be a natural Nagali, meaning that all of the movements you should expect should come from what you would feel would be the realized form of the character, rather than any specific style of play, such as closing in all the time or trying to get it to zone you all the time. This means that if you can make Cosmic Wolf drop certain things, or have execution problems, or just be somehow confusing in terms of spacing, you're likely to get some success. But general forms of play, it's hard to phase him. We consistently talk about his strength in defense, but it's not necessarily a turtle up defense. If you needed to beat him, your usual aim should be to go for lows
Round 1.
and hope that you can hit confirm your own lows.
Round 2. Fight! Final round. Fight! You lose. Round 1. Fight! Final round. Fight! You lose. Let's do this. Round one. Fight! Round two. Fight! Final round. Fight! Necalli wins. Round one. Fight! Round two. Fight! Minot wins. Round one. Fight!
Like most under-practiced players, Cosmo suffers from both after-image problems and specifics to getting used to an option or tactic that doesn't actually work consistently against a particular player or character type or something, leading to a lot of, let's say, grief. In this case, Minot being able to consistently poke Nikali out of dash-up things. As well as having the required timing for specific options in neutral based on that.
Round two.
It isn't necessarily enough to push back on the playstyle entirely, but Minot is good at handling and covering a lot of spaces, meaning that it's more difficult for Nikali to play completely naturally. Another problem that natural style players often face is that one character who is the strongest example of a particular archetype and tends to do the exact same thing the entire time becomes very stressful. As simply put, they prevent multiple layers of a matchup from ever happening. Minot plays keep out, and that means that Nikali spends most of his time playing close in. One option for this as the player is to simply not do anything in the resulting space. If there was a space in a matchup where you expected your opponent to come to you, but the opponent in question has no reason to do that, then it's fairly easy to just let go and go, you know what, I'm just not going to do anything in this spot. And you can like count it off in your head to recognize, okay, it's about time for that to end, and then proceed with more things. This is sort of a good option relative to that, in fact. As Manat does have full meter available, trying to get in and resolve the problem that way is an option for it.
Nekali wins. Let's do this. Round one. Fight! Round two. Fight! Final round. Fight! Nekali wins. Round one. Fight! Final round. Fight! Akuma wins. Round one. Fight! Round two. Fight! Final round. Fight! Akali wins. Let's do this. Round one. Fight! Round two. Fight!
Akali was for quite a while a perfect character for someone who really did not want to rely on any super fancy gimmicks at all. He has a good target combo, a good way to hit you from far away, and some reasonably decent supers in some specific ways around other people's moves. But as a whole, you just play Akali. You don't specifically have to come up with a lot of tricks to play Akali. If you really want to get out of a situation, most of the time he has an option to just get out of it. And when you do reach the point of activating the trigger and changing the flow of the game, all really happens with Akali is that he gets stronger and faster, so you just do everything you were doing before, but better. And there are definitely players for whom this is an extremely appealing experience.
Final round.
Most of the higher level Akali players have quote-unquote moved on, seeking either more explosive power or slightly better defense. But it's more so a matter of having come through the phase of playing Akali, understanding which side of Akali's playstyle was the one they were more willing to or more likely to rely on. Even for players who specifically tend to look for what they consider higher tier characters than Akali, they don't all pick the same one, with our main points of note being that Haitani, I believe, switched in almost entirely to Akuma, whereas on the other end, Phenom switched to Karin. And while one could say that both of those characters are considered to be very strong, and they do have some similarities in their way of playing, they're not enough that you could say this is what you go to from playing Akali. If you've decided that you are finding this character to have some weakness or some flow problem that you dislike, you're most likely going to have to play Akali well enough to define what that is, and then pick the character that doesn't have the problem. Or that just does more of the thing you actually do like in exchange for the thing you don't care about.
Necalli wins. Round one. Fight!
One of the large benefits of this character, regardless of whether or not you specifically aim to play him in the natural way, is actually that Necalli builds meter remarkably fast. If you're comfortable and you know what you're doing, you should generally just assume you're always going to have meter available. Either you're playing footsies all the time and you'll be able to confirm into super when that time comes to get back the life lead or whatever's needed, or if it's part of your flow and footsies, you should generally assume that you are probably going to have meter available whenever you need it. He's also not a character that specifically uses his meter for pressure most of the time, as in most of the things he wants to do with it either hit or they don't. So you generally will be able to say, okay, I have this much meter, I'm about to use it, but if I use it, I'll just have back 1 meter very shortly. Especially if you're good at playing the game where you don't get knocked down and don't have to worry too much about pressure.
Necalli wins. It's go time. Let's do this. Round one. Fight! You lose. Round one. Fight! Round two. Fight! You win! Round one. Fight! Round two. Fight! Final round. Fight! You lose.
One thing that can be an issue for people who play characters with similar styles and moves as secondaries is the fact that most of the time the range that you use for these characters is at least slightly different. And sometimes that very slight difference makes a world of difference to what moves tend to get hit and what counter strategies the opponent uses. This is something that comes up for Kansuki Dynasty a lot because Karin's range is slightly closer than Sakura's is for most situations, and Karin's way of bypassing neutral is based on something she uses when she's further out, when the expectation is that the opponent will try to keep her there, whereas Sakura bypasses neutral as part of playing footsies, a skill that Karin technically has, but is much less safe to do, and generally much more easily seen and more often trained against by any given opponent.
Round 2. Fight! Akuma wins. Round one. Fight! Round two. Fight! Akuma wins. Let's do this.
This matchup is fairly advantaged to Falk at this level because for Akuma to beat Falk requires a lot of physical execution ability most of the time. The result is that most Akuma players become frantic and get caught up in Falk's amazing damage, which she can get off nearly anything Akuma wants to do. Minor buffs to this character recently have made this even harder because she doesn't really have to fight you so much as she needs to stand there and be extremely annoying for 30 seconds at a time.
Round one.
One thing that makes it easy for Akuma though, when he does have the flow bone, is the fact that he can almost always throw Red Fireball from much closer than he can against any other character because Falk is unlikely to jump. And when she does jump, she doesn't get much of a payoff for doing so. Meaning that this space right here is literally a Red Fireball space in this matchup instead. Fortunately for Suntier, given what his focus might be for the day, she's also a character who's particularly weak to his cross-up air tatsu and technically his normal air tatsu as well because, as we've noted before, despite Falk being a character who is good at anti-airing in the strict sense, she's not so good at dealing with characters whose entire aim is to get over her head and mislead her about whether or not that's going to happen.
You wouldn't let me have the easy way.
That is still, however, the difficulty of it. There are minor things that you need to be able to execute very fast and not flinch when they don't pay off. Falk, on the other hand, needs to play a little bit more aggressively against Akuma than against most characters. Otherwise, she may not have the meter to do the conversion required for the finish before Akuma can catch her in some long combo of his own and finish her off. Since most of Falk's ways out of Akuma's pressure involve using up the same meter that she would need to make her comeback without getting a lot of damage from it, the situation improves for Akuma more so by playing close range and stressing out Falk than anything else. Her recent changes, especially with her stand light punch, which were not seen, actually make it easier for her to avoid the situation, but also mean that Akuma still gets to do that red fireball.
You won't miss. It's not done. Handle this. Good enough.
Falk wins. Round one. Fight!
Sunterra has also recently been able to use the Fault Bot, and while I don't spend a lot of time fighting it, there's still a lot more little nuance that you can get out of just a couple sessions with any given bot if you're not familiar with the character much. And I'm definitely seeing something that sort of indicates that's happening. But I expect it's going to take a while to get used to the idea of red fireball as a flitsy tool. The move does take very long to start up, and most characters will hit you or something long before that happens.
There was no fear of losing.
Final round. Fight!
But now with both characters at full meter, this becomes very difficult for Akuma simply because Fault's conversion tends to be better. On the other hand, playing footsies for a long time often means that until Fault actually has C meter as well, that meter isn't going to be so useful. A more confident player would probably not sit on it for as long, as it's easier to do certain things with it, but we don't see the conversion into super there, for example. With potentially good reason. It might have simply led into people making a comeback from there, and that would just be sad.
Falk wins. Let's do this.
One of the things Sakura cares about in this matchup, probably the most, is the fact that she can't use her V skill, but she needs her V trigger. It's similar to the Laura matchup where once she has it, a lot of options Falk had in neutral disappear. Otherwise, she's a character who's really good at the general form of Falk bot training that we've been purporting on the bot page, specifically learning the right spacing and timing to jump, both to get over the down shot and just reach the character in general. But Sakura has a specific thing that other characters don't have. The ability to make a really good whiff punish from getting close to Falk and then backdashing. Meaning that she doesn't have to take a lot of close range risks once she does jump. She can get in, or at any point where she thinks she is not in a safe or optimal position for herself, backdash because Falk is not a character that keeps up with her particularly well.
There was no fear of losing.
Round 2. Fight.
You can see that minor kind of stuttery lag that we normally don't care about at all, really. In this matchup in particular, it's even less of a serious issue. It can mess a little bit with your hit confirms, but since Falk doesn't have a lot of moves where you need to hit confirm, it doesn't come up.
Lock on target.
It is in fact a skill you can build up as you go, understanding that sometimes when you hit a button and you don't know whether or not it landed on your opponent, you could just not kill. Unfortunately for Kansuki Dynasty, as we all know, she doesn't backdash much, and working it into a natural flow becomes difficult. The main reason this is harder for Falk at this level is because they're not quite as used to how to hold all their buttons yet in order to charge at their shot. You can catch a backdash with the shot, but in order to do this you had to choose to not use any of your buttons and fixes. And to deal with a character who's capable of getting into your face quickly enough to be a pain when it comes to that. Some minor unpredictability on the ranges of Sakura's normals and approaches make this even harder for Falk in the long run. But that's the backdash moment, and without it, things get difficult. This is primarily because once Falk does start to hit you, she has what most people will consider an unnatural amount of control. We're used to a certain range, meaning that the opponent doesn't get to hit more buttons without being whiff punishable because their buttons will whiff. Falk is not a character where the buttons whiff, so you don't get to do anything at those spaces. The Falk player in turn gets more and more used to you as it goes on, meaning that the match just gets more difficult, and when she has a half-life conversion, you can expect that things will get really messy really quickly. Even though this player is not using it, she is actually also a character who's quite good at cross-up jumping if she really needs to be. Meaning that if you are unable to space yourself to deal with the problem, you won't be able to anti-air either.
Final round. Fight.
Sakura as a character is one who we specifically gave the option to dash in and do things or block, because honestly Sakura's dash is a strong part of her overall game plan, even though it's not a particularly strong dash in itself.
You win. Round one. Fight.
This means that a lot of this matchup is a mechanical test for the Fault player. Can they get themselves to hold enough buttons to potentially catch a backdashing Sakura, or just to use the shot in front of them to control space when Sakura moves in other ways that they don't like. There is some benefit to Fault in backdashing herself, but her backdash is nowhere near as good, and most of the intentions that go along with it would break the player's rhythm. Which leads to the confusing situation of playing a zoner and specifically needing to not use your zoning tools for zoning. Falk is generally understood to be a mid-range zoner, but even then, Sakura often spends her time at the point where she really can just do the forward version of the move, as in she doesn't need to crouch. So you can measure approximately how well this match is going for our Fault player purely by whether or not her hand is glowing. If it isn't, chances are that control is relatively on Council Dynasty's side.
It's not done. Handle this.
And possibly that the stress level is affecting the outcome. This makes sense given that one has to suppress a lot of instincts from other matchups in order to make this work out for you as the Fault player.
Final round. Fight.
Sakura's ability to output damage is not as strong, but it is definitely consistent. And given a matchup where she doesn't really have to worry about being pressured too heavily, being able to consistently build up enough meter to do bigger damage every time she needs to is at least comforting.
You win. It's go time. Let's do this. Round one. Fight! Round two. Fight! You lose. Round one. Fight! Round one. Fight!
This matchup is somewhat the opposite of that. Nakali is the one who needs to do bat dashing. He also needs to do some neutral jumping, but most of the time, an aware enough Sakura player will catch either of those things, if that's all you do. Therefore they have to be mixed in with well-spaced crouch medium kick and stomp. The crouch medium kick gives a good option for building up enough for disc guidance if you needed it, in case the Sakura player decided to back off and throw a fireball. You should almost always be able to react to that. With this V-trigger, it's also possible to just not even worry about that and be able to stomp or backdash once they have a way to deal with the backdash from the Sakura side. Eventually though, you do have to consider it because Sakura has the capacity to move into Nakali's space over and over in ways that, while he can counter them, she gets a much bigger payoff than he does if it goes her way. And as you can see, it's similar to Ryu's stand heavy punch, which we discussed a long time ago. Sometimes you just want the move there to put your opponent at a space where they don't get to do anything.
You win!
At that space, Nakali needs to either backdash or stomp.
It's go time! Let's do this! Round one. Fight!
This is the incredibly rare stand light kick matchup for Akuma. This is because of how exactly Sakura's normals start up, and the amount of time most will take. If she wants to walk up to Akuma and play footsies, unlike many other characters where the initial thing she's trying to do is go for a low that extends a block that is difficult to beat out, Sakura's normals are very slightly off in that they'll tend to get hit in some way by Akuma's stand light kick. Exactly why this is, we're not sure, and it's not entirely consistent, but if you didn't know what to press in order to keep Sakura from sticking to you, the light kick, just stand light kick, is a good option. This does not really apply to the rest of footsies, which you should generally just play normally, but if you feel a Sakura coming toward you and there's going to be a problem, stand light kick will resolve that problem. It will also whiff punish a ton of things in a way that gives Akuma a spacing advantage, even if it does not convert to much damage directly. is also something that happens in matches between two Sakura, but since they're both trying to get in the same space and hit it, it's less effective. It also helps Akuma to deal with a lot of perfectly spaced normals from Sakura otherwise. Other than her stand medium kick, he can basically hit light kick at any point in footsies that he wants. Not because he will punish anything, or even necessarily be safe, because she could just uppercut. But because the player from the Sakura side has enough to worry about Akuma doing without just being old.
You win. Round one. Fight! Round two. Fight!
But in the end, a large part of the actual purpose for it is to reduce the amount of risks Akuma has to take, and in some ways, reduce the amount of energy he has to use to achieve the same goals. Sakura's strength in this matchup is basically that she can tire Akuma out and find herself with lots of meter, whereas he has very little.
Round one. Fight!
Since even Sakura's light uppercut is not actually crush counter punishable, it is also unbalanced in terms of whose escape uppercut is more likely to get them killed when they choose incorrectly.
Round two. Fight!
This doesn't necessarily mean that Sakura can take more risks. After all, we do have the entire bot just to train you to use different punishes on this character. But it does mean that in the situation where both are unsure of what's going on, Sakura players are more likely to be daring for longer without starting to feel as if things are going badly. You also have that point where her EX moves her forward far enough that if the opponent was moving toward her or over her head at the time, not everyone can get the big punish even on the crush counterable move.
Final round. Fight.
While one's aim should almost always be to make few mistakes, characters that don't get punished too heavily for making their mistakes, or whose style entirely is built around taking a big risk and then just not dying. Looking at you, Blanca. The players of these characters tend to be a little bit less stressed out by certain sequences of events. But Akuma edges it out with a bit more health. We proceed on into the probably penultimate match of this stream. Not necessarily for the lounge itself. As usual, it's likely to stay open longer than the stream itself is likely to go, meaning that if you do want to join in, now's probably the time. It looks like our Falk player has switched to Ryu, but given their current opponent, maybe that was not as good. Still, zoning instincts do carry over. The main problem here being that whereas Falk tends to have quite a bit of advantage in a zoning game versus Akuma, due to the way that she can crouch under things and at least get some shots off, it's a little bit harder to do with Ryu, even with the V skill, the new V skill that he has, and the changes to V Trigger 1.
Round one. Fight.
Still, being able to play the parry game here has always been a strong part of Ryu's counter zoning. And it's really going to come down to whether or not this player is able to do the uppercut part of it, because when you have to do an entire motion, it tends to tire you out or make you more twitchy than if you just have to hit 3 buttons. Or in some cases 1 button, depending on the config.
Round two. Fight.
This interaction is now much more Ryu's favorite. Before, being able to do that basically led to a situation that didn't help that much. You were still in a zoning situation, you still didn't have a projectile that actually beat the red fireball. And every fireball you threw would make it go away. Now, you'll at least get a timer for throwing better projectiles, even though, strictly speaking, you haven't improved the situation relative to the red fireball movement at all.
Akuma wins.
Understanding how best to make use of this can be difficult because the usual feeling is, okay, I'm going to activate this now and just use it. But often your goal is to use this for pressure.
Fight.
You probably get like 2 attempts out of it in that way, but against Akuma, who tends to take a lot of damage, those 2 moments of being able to get in, throw fireballs as part of pressure, and play completely offensively can be really helpful, especially when the opponent sees a move that technically should be treated as zoning, and then all of a sudden you're in their face. This does again, of course, depend on the opponent's mental state. If you realize that zoning is easier because they want to walk forward at you, go for it. But in general, someone that you're having trouble opening up is the same sort of person that throws enough of their projectiles at you for you to easily build up meter. More importantly though, if you can keep it going for long enough, Ryu takes no damage. You were on the offense, right? So you built up V-Trigger, possibly without taking much damage at all. You use the V-Trigger to pressure your opponent, and now you just retreat and do it all over again, because nothing stops Ryu from building up like as many V-Triggers as he wants in one round, as long as he never actually gets hit.
Akuma wins. Let's do this.
So we go into our final on-stream match of the night.
Round 1.
Probably the last match for Wolf at least, which means he's more likely to go all out. Or at least lighten up on specific training goals. The lounge will stay open, probably for another half hour, possibly up to an hour depending on the mood of the players within it. Given who is left, and the fact that the Wolf is probably going to leave before the lounge host, current lounge host leaves. You can generally look for Suntier or Moon Siren if you would like to join for the last half hour to an hour now.
Round 2.
Tomorrow content we expect to be Under Night, Unist, specifically because we want to get one more in before we have to go do all that learning for the new version. As for Wednesday's content, hard to say. But we, as always, say Sandbag Casuals is coming, and then it never does. So assume that that will happen this week too. But we are building up more reasons to have Sandbag Casuals recently. Specifics of players having new ideas or new execution or minor little things that they might want to see how effective is this actually going to be. And we tend to have sandbag casuals soon after the release of a new character, though honestly, Seth is not really a very new feeling character. There's not a whole lot to get used to. If you input our Seth bot, which is honestly relatively easy compared to most of the inputs we ask of people, you probably have met some of this yourself. You can find that Seth bot, of course, at 2-mk.org. We used to have a Seth bot before, but that was for Unist, and that one has been moved to Unist-Seth-bot. But of course, you can just find them by navigating through the site itself, as it's designed for easy access. We will be having a few new bots for Championship Edition, which is why you see, despite the fact that we have many bots on the site now, you still see more bots coming soon, at least on the Street Fighter page. And of course, we're going to have the same thing probably happen, or at least some modifications, when we get the Unist ones. Hopefully Unclear will have a system for actually saving bots separately, but we don't speak enough Japanese to send any demands to people about this. Nor is it that easy to implement, honestly, so we don't necessarily expect to see it. We are going to hope that Guilty Gear Strive has something to this effect, because last time it basically had nothing to use for this purpose. On Friday, therefore, well no, actually I should have said that Thursday will, as always, be Kame House. I'm not sure if Season 3 of Dragon Ball FighterZ is out sooner rather than later. I should probably check it. Because if it is, that's going to be an experience. Join us then, whether or not it is available. But on Friday, we were working on Helena Bot. We got preempted by the fact that Seth came out a little bit before we expected, and Seth Bot was really obvious in how it should be built. Meaning that we were able to do disc guidance for that last week Friday. Go check that on, I think it should be on the YouTube by now, but of course if it is not, it is recent enough to be in our Twitch video archives. It'll be fairly obvious. But that means that Helena Bot got preempted 1 week, and we are probably going to see her this week, of course. We did lessen our focus on our DOA bots, because somehow in all that we did not actually realize that the bot does not even stay between matches. I guess it's because we got so used to it, that being the bare minimum that we would get from a training mode. So honestly, they're not that useful right now unless you're getting used to the game and are not benefiting from or having much fun playing DOA directly. But if you're the type who has gotten used to our bots and really like them in other games, or even just find yourself drawn to do this type of content, here's a new 3D game for you to get into. It is free. And most of the bots that we have are bots based on the free characters, meant to teach you some basics of it, so make use of that however suits you. Helena is not a free character. We are past the free character stage at this point. And now just doing characters that one of us happens to own because we play them or something. Which is what slowed us down, but we are going to be seeing some of that. There's a good chance we'll go back on a really long hiatus as soon as we realize that all of the Unist bots need to be upgraded to Unclear bots. We have less bots of that type than you'd think though, because a lot of them share inputs with each other, so technically we only really have 8 bots for Unist. I think it's 8, might be 9. So bear that in mind. The issue is that depending on the changes to the characters, the inputs given may no longer work for both characters on both sides, and we're going to have to do a lot of checking on that as well. So if you are one who uses our bots from the Unist side, make sure to stay abreast of that as well. Any new changes, or sometimes even, hey, this doesn't work anymore, tends to be displayed on the main page of the website at 2-mk.org. We do not always, however, announce these things on Twitter. Twitter is mainly for announcing new bot releases, certain corrections, and of course, things we are streaming. You can find all of that information at 2_mk_FGC, which will usually tweet around the start of stream on any given day, namely 7 Eastern Time, or a little bit after depending on the situation. You may soon be seeing a bit more streaming as a generality, since people will be more so streaming their training sessions, and since there are more bots going to be available and visible, those training sessions are more likely to involve progressions and tests of bots that exist, or new ideas within bots. We do poke at some of them, which is why sometimes if you watch the bot that is displayed for a player, if they happen to be doing sandbag casuals, for example, does not always match the actual bot on the page. If you do want those, you can usually just contact us. Same contact page, same contact information as always. You can contact us on Twitter and we will probably notice it, but it will most likely be just before stream, as we do not currently spend a lot of time watching Twitter. Who knows, that may pick up as well. Either way, we've come to the end of this stream. Once again, join the lounge if you want to. Probably you're looking for Rune Siren, maybe for Suntier. Probably not for DeWolf, and I think the Fault left. So, this has been Rillian for Team 2MK. Good luck with your training, and good night everyone.